Hello and welcome to the Federal Low Code Trailblazers podcast. This is season 2, episode 1, part of the ATARC Federal IT newscast. This episode is focused on citizen development. My name is Bill Bunce. I'm an enterprise account executive with Pegasystems and an industry chair for the ATARC Low Code Working Group, which is a subset of the ATARC DevOps technology pillar. Just so we're all on the same page, citizen development is a business process that encourages non-IT trained employees to become software developers using IT sanctioned low-code, no-code platforms to create business applications. My guest this month is Ryan Korn. Ryan is a Harvard graduate with a master's in education and a focus on social entrepreneurship. Ryan is a senior cloud architect and product manager in the Bureau of Industry and Security at the Department of Commerce. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Bill and ATARC, for having me.
Awesome. Ryan, why don't you maybe give us a little bit of the history you've had with low code and maybe how you're leveraging low code today? That would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I started with low-code development at the Small Business Administration back in pre-COVID time, so it's hard to remember the exact year, but I want to say it was late 2019 or early 2019, late 2018. And basically what we were looking to do was leverage the Dynamics 365 tool set from Microsoft as our enterprise CRM application, as well as for other low-code, no-code applications to really accelerate development. But it was something that was really brand new to SBA. We had a couple pockets of like really small Salesforce implementations. And so we were looking to stand up this new platform and really get it rolling. So we had begun with a pilot. At the time, it was for our Office of Advocacy. They were looking for a tracker to understand what all of their attorneys were doing as they advocated for policies on behalf of small businesses in the federal government. And so we just spun up the platform and had a very small contract. I think there were 3 or 4 people on the contract and just started poking around, trying to understand the capability, in this case of Dynamics 365 and Power Apps, which is a subset of that capability, and working with the business unit. And that was how we got started. And then once COVID hit, we had this capability to stand up an enterprise CRM. We ended up doing that. And we ended up going from a user community of 10 in this Office of Advocacy to 3,000 or 4,000 within a matter of weeks as a result of COVID. And then also leverage that capability for a variety of other applications for the credit risk management business process and a number of others across all of our different lines of business. And it turned out to be really cost effective and really successful. And then that was how I ended up at the Bureau of Industry and Security. My supervisor at the time at SBA became the CIO over at BIS. And they were looking to modernize, basically soup to nuts, the entire organization. There hadn't really been a focus on modernization. And they were looking to organize that modernization around low-code, no-code tools, given the resource limitations of being at a very small agency. So that's how I ended up where I'm at now, and that's how the journey of low-code, no-code continues there.
So one of the big advantages of low code is typically speed, the ability to build out and roll out into production, much quicker than traditional software development. Sounds like you're really just getting started at Commerce. Maybe reference point back to the SBA. You referenced a bunch of different applications that you were able to build out, bring people into it. Can you give us a sense of what were the scope of those, how many users were they rolled out to, and how long did it take to build some of those apps using low code?
Yeah, it really depends on the mentality that you bring to it. And I think that mindset, I know it's something that we're going to touch on in the conversation here. That's really key because the tools enable you to do so many things that you couldn't have done in the past in terms of speed and sort of time to release and that sort of thing. So there's a couple applications that I have in mind at SBA that were developed with small teams over the course of a year. So that credit risk management, the credit risk management application that I mentioned, that was more or less a year-long effort. Again, like understanding the capabilities, working closely with the business units to understand the requirements, that sort of thing. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, when COVID hit, we went from receiving like 500 emails a day to our customer service mailbox for our Agile loans, for that relief program, which is for basically loans for disaster survivors, for their businesses and their homes to be able to get back on their feet so that they're able to maintain their houses and businesses and that sort of thing. And obviously heavily used for COVID as well. So we went from getting 500 or so customer service emails to 35,000-ish a day, basically overnight. And, at one point we got a call from the Office of Disaster Assistance that administers the program saying, like, we think that our mailboxes are about to fill up. Can you help us? Yeah. And sure enough, in a matter of, I don't know, 2-3 days, they did. And what we ended up doing was in 6 days, spinning up an enterprise CRM application that is still in use to this day. So I wouldn't advise that necessarily, but it is doable in like crisis kind of situations. And that was with me and maybe two other folks.
But it does, it's the art of the possible, in a pinch when you had to, you were able to stand up an application in 6 days. Yeah, that's a great example. I appreciate it. So the people that were working on those, obviously the topic for today's conversation is we're going to get to citizen development, but did you have traditional software developers that were learning this idea of low code, or were you, where did you start?
Yeah, I would say that is where we started, even with that pilot well before COVID. And the reason is that these tools haven't been around for a very long time. I remember we were joking at one point with a contracting officer saying like, oh, we need 5 years of experience with this tool set. And I'm like, the tool set came out 2 years ago. I don't know how we're going to find that capability. So, obviously those are conversations that need to be had. I think it's more common now, but still, I think the demand is also accelerating. So for as many, people now who have that capability, you've got still a gap in folks who want to be able to use it. So, yeah, it's really a challenge. And that's where, again, I think mindset comes into play. Like if folks are willing to try things a different way, willing to experiment, willing to fail in small pilot type of instances, and willing for things to take longer, at least initially, than you would expect them to with a low code, no code platform as you use the capabilities, I think you end up growing that capability. And I think it's also important to recognize how important it is to have partners and partnerships that understand that mindset as well. If you're, even if you have that mindset in your government office, if your leadership doesn't have that mindset, or the agency leadership doesn't have that mindset, or the contractor that you're working with doesn't have that mindset, then it's not going to be successful. These things really need to be cultivated at this stage in the game, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, I'm guessing that eventually, as you had some success, you began to incorporate this idea of citizen development. We'll talk about in a minute, what is a citizen developer, but how did that evolve? How did you begin to incorporate, people that aren't traditionally trained in IT or software development in the process?
Yeah, I think actually talking about what we're doing now at the Bureau of Industry and Security is a really good example for this, because this is like we're going through this process right now. And interestingly, I would say that citizen development is really on a spectrum with pure IT, full stack development, that sort of thing. Because what we're talking about is introducing a new tool set, right? And new ways of doing things. And even a lot of our IT professionals, super skilled, but they just don't have experience with the tool set, both on the government and the contractor side. So one of the things that we're doing right now is building out the capability. And so what that means is making sure that the foundations are in place where folks have the opportunity to learn the tool set. In the education sector, we call that scaffolding for students, right? Making sure that they're able to move up in a way that makes sense. and is structured so that they're not sort of trying to eat the whole elephant at the same time. So for example, I've really dug into the tools that we're using right now: BIS, Power Apps, and Power BI are two of the biggest ones. So Power Apps for application development and business process flows, and Power BI for data visualizations. Come up with some examples with a design guide, worked with business units to understand like some basic requirements, and then do trainings for our developers and making sure that they have access to the different data sets and all the different things that they'll need in order to be successful, right? And then from there, the goal is, okay, now that our developers are successful and we've got that internal foundation, then expand that same to that same mindset to a further outer ring, essentially, for the data analysts at the Bureau. And then eventually for just the standard business users who are curious and see that they can solve some of their business problems on their own now with these tools. And so that way we're building this complete ecosystem of developers, citizen developers with varying, with varying tool sets throughout, and also then maintaining a community of practice so that they can collaborate and learn from each other and make sure that we're responding to their needs in terms of like governance, design, business capabilities, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Great. So with that ecosystem in mind, what would your interpretation or what would your definition of a citizen developer be?
My definition of a citizen developer would be anybody who is curious and persistent and interested in trying new things and using new technologies to solve business problems that they've been having. I really think the emphasis has to be on that mindset. And not so much on someone who uses technology just for the sake of doing it, or who solves business problems in another way. I think it really needs to be somebody who is, eager and excited to invest a little bit of their time in building a new skill set. Gotcha.
So, I mean, interest in participating being number one, but is there a set of skills that, we should look for, when someone says, hey, I really want to get involved in this, it's an application, more than likely, I'm guessing that they're going to use after it's delivered potentially. But, what do we look for in terms of skills in a citizen developer to say, yes, please join the team?
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything that I would look for other than the mindset and the curiosity, because if people have that learner's mindset, they're going to get to wherever it is that they're able to go, however far that is. Just using myself as an example, you can use some of these low code, no code tools with custom development and create, interesting plugins and new capabilities that were never, intended by the designers of the systems. And that's really neat, but I personally will never get to that point. Like, it's just not going to happen for me, because that's not, my skill set or my interest level. But I think it's important to emphasize that anybody who's interested can do this. And it's just a function of time if they're interested. I think what the other way that I think about it is, I think the primary technologies that we use, things like Microsoft Office, right, where you've got Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I keep coming back to those because those are things that I think everybody at this point understands what they are, how to use them. Maybe you're not super advanced with, Excel formulas or that sort of thing, but I think everybody has a really good handle on those at this point. But that's a function of them being around for 20, 30 years. I think Excel launched in like the original Macintosh or something like that. So they've been around long enough. And I think also there is sort of a analogous physical or non-technical thing that those systems were based on, right? Like, if I went back in time like 80 years and said to somebody, I'm going to explain to you Microsoft Word, that's actually sort of doable. You can say like, okay, here's a typewriter and I'm going to connect your typewriter to the television and imagine that the words now are appearing on the TV, right? Like that's doable. Not so doable for application development or business process flows or, data visualizations and those sorts of things. That's something that's really or databases, right? Like that, those are really only enabled by technology. And so I think that there's this conceptual leap that people need to take But at the same time, I think that and like I said, these tools are really new. So I think that in 10 or 15 years, this will just be sort of a standard skill set in many people's tool belt. They'll just, in the same way that they use Word and Excel and PowerPoint, they'll say, yeah, I use Power BI and Power Apps or Salesforce or Appian or whatever it is. It'll just become part of the everyday skill set of an office
So,
knowledge worker.
do you think there's a role for the citizen development in every project, or is it, oh, well, citizen developments are appropriate for projects of this size and scope, but not this other, not mission critical? Or is it, this is a new mindset and there's a role for citizen developers to play in every project?
Yeah, I feel really strongly about there being a role for citizen developers to play in every project, especially being in a small agency where, like, I'm on a team of 3 feds right now, or four feds right now. And we're trying to build a new capability that a lot of people don't have experience with. So the more that we can spread that around, it's in our best interest, especially where low code, no code development is concerned, because the structure is in place for people to be involved in ways that they wouldn't have been able to be involved before. I think the key, though, is understanding when is the right time in a project lifecycle and having the appropriate governance in place. Because again, if you say to someone, who wants to be a citizen developer, hey, I want you to build this massive workflow application that requires these custom plugins, and we don't have a design guide yet, so go figure it out. It's like, okay, no, that's not going to happen. But if you've got an agile methodology in place, exactly, and in the same way, like even on just a regular development team, you wouldn't say to your designer, hey, go code this, and you wouldn't say to your engineer, go design that, right? Like there's different resources for different for different work items that need to be completed on a project. So I think that if you've scoped things out properly and if you've got the right governance in place, it's totally doable. Again, up to a point of, like, you don't want to boil the ocean, have 1 million people involved in one project. So yeah, I really do feel strongly that can be done if you've got people who are willing and able and interested.
So at least within your group, your organization, what does a team look like? So it sounds like we've got a combination of, traditional software developers, as well as, how does that team come together, and what does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, certainly our standard starting place is, your standard like Agile Scrum team where you've got designers, engineers, maybe a business analyst, a Scrum master / project manager. And then you usually have somebody who's focused on data visualizations and has that data expertise. I would say broadly that is, a team of 5 to 7 people. And then for larger projects, you might have 2 teams of 5 to 7, or, it really just depends on the nature of the project, how you break up the team. That's what we're looking to build right now. And then the next step is to get to that outer ring where we can say, okay, hey, look, we've got the pipeline in place. We've got the governance in place. If you want to add this additional form, for example, to this table, here's how you would go about doing that. But I think it's a matter of upskilling everybody across the board first, right? And then, as I said, building out that process where if they build a form, we have a way of getting it into the application, or if they build a new process flow, we have a way of getting to the application. And that's where those more experienced folks, the IT departments, really comes into play, where they're focused then on building that pipeline so that they can ingest the content and the capabilities that are developed by citizen developers. And that is something that is not a super mature capability, I think, in any low code, no code system quite yet, and something that we're looking to ultimately build here at BIS. But that is more, that's certainly higher up on the maturity curve, but that's definitely the end goal.
Gotcha. So do we grow our citizen developers from within the organization? Do we hire citizen developers? It's a combination of both. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think combination of both, but I'm also really passionate about elevating your workforce and partnering with people who have been in the organization for a while, for a few reasons. One is, usually they're very excited to get these tools, right? They're like, all of a sudden, I think they're so used to IT being very abstract and very distant from them. And so it's like, I submit a request and maybe somebody hears me, maybe somebody doesn't, but then it's this whole process to build what I would want. So is it even prioritized in the first place? And so, even for something as simple as like a dashboard or, updating an application like form or drop-down menu, that sort of thing, that can take a really long time in sort of the old paradigm, even if you have that Agile team, because the skill sets are so specialized with these capabilities. But now if I just turn it over and say, hey, look, yeah, it took a little time to get your data connected here, but now that I have it connected, here's Power BI, and here's access to this data source. And here, let me give you a couple trainings and hook you up with our community of practice. All of a sudden, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing that I can now do this on my own. So I think that's part of it, right? Is like empowering people with things that they never knew that they always wanted, I think is key. I think the other thing too is that, I never started in IT. My major in college was political science. And, the goal for me has always been to serve and contribute in some way that's meaningful. And, I think I and a lot of other folks that are sort of at the stage of career that we're at, move from organization to organization after a few years. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's nothing wrong with staying either. But I think if you're going to do that, then it's incumbent upon you to leave the place better than you found it, right? And so that means oftentimes elevating the workforce so that they have the skills and access to different tools to be able to carry on and after you're gone or after whoever is sponsoring the program is gone. So I think that's really important too. And that's also why I've gravitated towards low code, no code as well. Like I mentioned earlier, there's no way in the universe I'm ever going to be a full stack developer. I just don't have that mindset or a skill set. Frankly, I think patience, it takes a lot of patience to debug, a script, that sort of thing. But to be able to turn folks over to a tool that's like, hey, look, this is like PowerPoint and Excel combined, and it may be a little bit rough around the edges, but look at all the things that you can do. That really excites me because it puts the power in the hands of folks who are actually doing the work and are carrying the mission forward, not just over day to day, but over many times decades. So just philosophically, I think it's super important to elevate the workforce and give them what they need. And then on the flip side, it's one thing to hire for somebody who's got an advanced IT skill set. And, we were talking before the podcast, maybe you can find those people, maybe you can't, super in demand. But it's a lot harder to say it's a lot harder, I think, for people to hire someone who is got a specific business expertise and then also maybe has some kind of technical expertise. Yeah. And which is why I think that if you're looking for the business expertise as well as the curiosity, the persistence, the mindset to try new things, I think that's where you're going to be most successful in building a citizen developer program.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I hear your degree in political science. I have a degree in psychology. So when you graduate, what do I do with this?
Right.
I can do this. So, I mean, I feel like we've kind of touched around this, but can you summarize what are the benefits of involving citizen developers in a program? If we didn't have citizen developers, what are we missing from the equation?
Yeah, I think you're missing a lot of things. I think, the way that I think of citizen developers is imagine you're a product owner on a standard Agile team, but multiply that understanding of the business capability by 1,000, because now you've got so many more eyes on being able to say, well, wait a minute, that's not quite right, or we don't need to do it this way, we should do it that way. So I think the understanding of the business, just by having those folks in the room in a structured way, is huge and saves just tremendous time and energy and tears and heartbreak in the long run, because you're getting the requirements right up front from the line people themselves. So I think that's one. I think the second thing is resources. For some larger firms, that might not be as much of an issue. You can find more folks, offer higher salaries, that sort of thing. We don't have that luxury in BIS, and I would argue most places in government don't have that luxury. So it starts to, it basically, having a citizen development program enables you to then say, okay, how do we build up our workforce in a way that's accessible to them, and leverage these additional resources that'll get us to completion faster. I think that the requirements and the resourcing, in my mind, those are really the imperatives. But I also think that it's the right thing to do. Like, I don't think that having a silo for technology and a silo for the business, like, I don't think that benefits our customers. I don't think that it benefits the citizens. I think that collaboration is really instrumental in delivering the best services for the community. And so the degree that we can blend skill sets and engage with each other more often, I think that's going to lead to better products and better services. And I think that those values always get infused in the product in some way. And I think as people are using services, they pick up on, did somebody care about me and my experience as they were, building this? And, something that's, I think at one point was the last thing that developers thought about, now is having to become the first thing, because not only is there a lot of excitement around like customer experience and those sorts of things, but now that if in a citizen developer environment, if you're engaging with them every day, they're almost always going to be advocating for the customers and the people they serve, and wanting to do things better. So for me, it's a pragmatic thing to do, I would say, but it's also very values driven.
Gotcha. I can't tell you how many times I've said, whoever developed this application obviously never had to use it.
Right.
Because you would never do it this way.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the struggle with changing the mindset in government is, 20 years ago, again, nobody even, I think on the customer side, thought about the experience, because they weren't, it wasn't a world in which you could just go online and in 2 clicks buy literally whatever you want from anywhere in the world, right? But given that government likes to build one thing, or do one thing one way and just keep it that way for a long time, not only have we missed out on the new technologies, which are probably probably important as far as efficiency and uptime and security and those sorts of things.
Right.
I think we've also missed out on growth in the mindset and in the paradigm around how do we actually serve customers in the digital age. And so that's as much as what we're trying to change as anything, right? Like, we're trying to implement these new technologies. Sometimes maybe there's not a point, but more often than not, that point is going to be around improving the customer experience as much as anything else.
So you mentioned that you're using Agile methodologies, which makes sense. I can't imagine, delivering at speed without using Agile, but specific to citizen developers, do they take right to the concept of Agile? Any issues around, I'm guessing that it's, something that's new to them because it's an IT focused methodology, but what are your thoughts about involving citizen developers in Agile specifically?
Yeah, so I mentioned before the concept of scaffolding, where you basically build a structure that people can take to at very early on, and then sort of enhance it a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and all of a sudden, folks are fully competent and capable and understanding what's going on. I think that just in the absence of any changes, Agile methodologies are really good at that. I mean, those are frameworks that are designed to build structure around processes, right? So just like Scrum, for example, by having those daily stand-ups, by having your retros, by having your planning sessions, right? That's a structure right there that citizen developers can plug right into. So I think that is really straightforward. I think the challenge becomes when you want to have them engage in like a technical way. So as I mentioned, you've got your main, you've got your code base for your application, whatever it is. now I'm a citizen developer. I want to enhance that code base with a dashboard or a form or a new business process. How do we do that? Like, I can't just copy and paste and drop it in. It's got to be added to the code base. It's got to be tested, security review, all this sort of stuff. So that's where you have to make alterations to the existing processes that you might have to incorporate the work of citizen developers. But if you've got a robust CI/CD pipeline and you've built in testing, then that's just another framework, another process that you can very clearly lay out in just a couple of bullet points to your citizen developers, and they should get it and understand what the requirements are. But of course, then again, it's incumbent upon you and your team to say, okay, we got to build this pipeline. How do we do that? What tools are we going to use there?
Right.
And so I would say it's probably more of a challenge on the IT side than it is on the citizen developer side to actually understand, what to actually build that process.
Gotcha. So, if you're using Agile and traditional software development, and I'm thinking things like .NET, Java, and so on.
Yeah.
You're still involving, people that understand the process, the functionals in Agile. But why is low code, better? Because obviously a citizen developer means they're going to do some of the development. In order to do that with traditional, you have to teach them Java and .NET and some more complex things that would, I'm assuming, take longer. But why is low code better adapt, at involving citizen developers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, the barrier to entry is just too high in any other situation. And so, if you're a low code person, maybe, if you're someone who's able to do low code, like me, I like to think, that's something that I'm, decent at. But actually doing custom development is a bridge too far. And so I think that is part of it. And the other part of it is a lot of, in fact, I think all the low code systems are built on, graphic interfaces. So it's much less abstract for people to understand. Like, when you say form, what does that mean? Oh, here, let me show you. 2 seconds later, you can have a basic form there that shows the fields that they're trying to enter in their application. You can test things out and experiment a lot more easily. You don't really need to debug anything because the code is, you're not even looking at the code, right? You need to just, I think it puts the focus on the business process, right? And making sure that your business process is sound. So making sure, like, if you've got step 1, step 2, step 3, by doing the testing, you'll be able to figure out, oh, you know what, I should have had the customer enter this information on step 1 and, made it a required field or something like that. So, between being able to focus on the business process and just not having to worry about, summiting the mountain that is application development, I think it makes it, or that is, full stack application development, I think that makes it a lot more attractive to citizen developers. That they, again, getting back to that mindset, that they can think to themselves, you know what, I actually can do this and be a part of this and understand what's going on for myself without just relying on, what other people say.
Gotcha. Well, last question.
Yeah.
What's next for citizen developers? Are we at a point now where, we're now beginning to incorporate, citizens in the development process, but in the future, what do you see for citizen development?
Yeah, I think that the reason that there's a proliferation of these tools is because there's such a need for software development and not enough developers to be able to fill that need. And so by having these tools, you greatly accelerate, again, the time to delivery and the amount that you can deliver as well. So, I think, one, we're going to see a proliferation of tools. The second thing is, I think that we're going to see just incredible maturing of these tools. As I mentioned, it's early days, and maybe it doesn't seem like that because now it's been a couple of years and government is starting to pay more attention to these things. But I think that within the next 5 to 10 years, pretty much everything is going to be developed on low code, no code platforms. Certainly most new things, as well as anytime you're refactoring or rebuilding an old application, because if the tool is there, why wouldn't you use it? And there are certainly gaps in the low code, no code space at the moment. Developing pipelines to promote code from one environment to another, quite doable, but still a challenge, still technically difficult. So I think that is something that
some platforms handle that better than others, I will say.
Yeah, but I think generally that's a barrier to entry to having this like a full
Yep.
citizen development program. I think also engaging things like AI models and
Yep.
databases. There's challenges with CI/CD around databases, because if you're changing the data model, you have to change the application. But I think that as these more advanced capabilities mature, we're just going to see an incredible proliferation. And again, I think it's going to, just by a function of time and maturity, become something that ultimately becomes part of everybody's toolkit, the same way that Word, Excel, and PowerPoint has become over the past few years.
Yep. Well, I appreciate it. Well, Ryan, I want to thank you for your time and your unique insight that you were able to give us today. Well, until next month, when we have another conversation with a government trailblazer on the use of low code in government. My name is Bill Bunce. Thank you very much.